Hey, Quency.
Hi, Quency. Quency Phillips is Executive Director of Joint Ventures Lighthouse Initiative, formerly Building Back Better, established in 2021 as a backbone effort to support regional recovery and reduce stark inequalities magnified by the pandemic. Phillips has been committed to social good for more than 25 years through community service and entrepreneurship. Phillips most recently steered community engagement for Google Development Ventures' $15 billion Silicon Valley development portfolio. He was previously Chief Strategy Officer for HouseKeys in Morgan Hill and CEO of Fuzion, an advertising and a marketing agency for athletes and entertainers, and has maintained a consulting practice for nearly 10 years. He was Community Engagement Manager for Local Initiative Support Corporation in Oakland and a Chief Marketing Officer for Weather Tech Fasteners Global. He is a member of the ABFE, which advocates for responsive and transformative investments in Black communities. Welcome, Quency.
Woo!
Thank you. Sometimes I forget some of the stuff, but thank you for sharing, and I do not want to share that. Slideshow, here we are. It's almost the end of my day, but thank you all. Thanks for everybody that presented before me. Really happy to be here. This is going to be different. I don't think people are going to be begging for my slides after this. I'm going to be talking and doing a lot more narrative storytelling and qualitative in a qualitative presentation of sorts, especially as we look at the lived experience. But equity and electrification is what I'm here to talk about. And we do have a very interesting project that we are leading right now across Silicon Valley and beyond that's around electrification. All right, so this will probably be the last, corporate slide that I do for you all. No sales here. You can, see the stuff that's on there, but, we're Jedis over here. We do the whole, lightsaber thing, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. But really, as was mentioned, I'm responsible for overseeing over 125 community-based organizations and stakeholders across 2 counties in Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County, San Mateo County. So when you think about who those types of stakeholders are, there'll be the counties themselves, there'll be the cities within both of the counties, there'll be higher education institutions such as Stanford, there'll be community colleges such as Foothill College, there'll be Sacred Heart, Catholic Charities, all of those that are truly providing or trying to provide the ecosystem that we all need to thrive. But the biggest thing that we're really about are family sustaining opportunities, especially here in the Bay Area, where it's very expensive if you guys didn't get that memo. But again, that was my last thing. For some of you, hopefully some of you all get this and get a little chuckle out of it. But again, as we're talking about electrification, shout out to De La Soul, Plug One. And that's really what we're doing here. And a lot of my work related to electrification, I'm kind of embodying a bit of this type of mentality of being more of a communicator, more of an MC, although I have a lot more of that, a lot more than that behind me. You can check the link in, do all those other things. I don't like to get into all of that, but please don't look at me as just an MC or just someone that speaks well, right? Or just as a communicator. But I know in my role with the work that so many of you all are doing right now, impacting and trying to impact future generations, my job is to be a better storyteller and narrator of the great work that you're doing and how it really has the opportunity to change all of those AMI levels. Shout out to the last presentation, Lance. I was doing some of that stuff, but all of those AMI levels, bringing everybody's AMI level to the top, right? Really thinking about the hierarchy of needs pyramid and those things. So I'm going with Plug One through this conversation, but my story around clean energy and electrification starts in Chicago, South Side of Chicago, born and raised, half my life in streets of New York, but shout out to Miss Jackson, my cousins over there in Detroit, really happy. But I grew up in the same church as Jesse Jackson. My mom was, rest in peace, was his secretary. Operation Push was started in my home church. You look far enough, you'll see my little brown face way back when. But also, President Obama, came through our church. He's also someone that I knew well before he became president, but someone that I did meet at Northwestern based on the community work that he does. But it's really here where I start that lived experience, right? That we start to talk about, especially when it relates to equity. Some years back, I've lived in a bunch of different places, but I went back to my home church, building a nice church in the suburbs, got some land. We're going to do all of that good stuff. But bigger than that, my father, rest in peace as well, he had actually started to buy places around Chicago, especially the south side of Chicago, that he would then turn into places that any family or friend would be able to have a shelter, right? And so in Chicago, you can get some of the properties. Shoot, they used to do properties for $1, but we got a hold of some property in Chicago. Long story short, I went back to help oversee the project after some things went left. A lot of dollars were spent. The reality was my pops used folks within the church, some men in the church, great men, well-intentioned, really trying to work, especially around the weatherization programs that started to come in, and they spoke about the senior programs really changing the stuff around. They started to become contractors for folks, and they ended up being the lead contractor for this property. One piece that they ended up talking about and talking my pops into was getting a tankless water heater. I don't know if I told y'all, but I'm from the south side of Chicago. Tankless water heaters are not for the south side of Chicago. Our pipes freeze, right? And so went through that process, spending, a bunch of money, understanding, realizing how they got to that point. Oh, this is new, something better, clean energy, blah, blah, blah. Didn't even know about electric panels, didn't know that they couldn't complete the job, right? We ended up having to hire other folks who were able to change our panels, all of that. But when the winter came, that tankless water heater left. But that part of this lived experience really is when we start talking about equity, when we start talking about our homes, when we start talking about education and capacity building, especially within equity. We can't throw out equity without really thinking about capacity building. People understand and having common and same language. Resources being available from one neighborhood to the next, not different resources. So a bit of my story really comes from the south side of Chicago and the church. And a lot of our stories, our grandparents and others that will come, especially a part of the evolution of clean energy, will also probably be told in community centers, community-based organizations and churches as well, right? But let me move forward. Right now, I find myself in Silicon Valley. Told you all, you probably are not going to want my slides, right? Not about to hit you with a whole bunch of data. Maybe a couple slides you might like, but storytelling, juice. Hopefully, again, some of you all get the pun, get the reference, but more importantly, as we start to think about equity and diverse populations and inclusivity, really starting to think about what that means. Who has the juice? Who has the power? I'm not going to sit here on recording. I'm not going to say I'm the most powerful man in Silicon Valley. No way. I might use a pun after we do our electrification energy, but I'm not going to sit here and say that. But I understand the power of my position, the power of partnership, and the power of having so many people already at the table engaged for one common goal: family sustaining income for all. So as we come into this opportunity for juice, I'm now a homeowner in California. It's a crazy thing to even say coming from the south side of Chicago and streets of New York, but I am. And one of the things that I already had from my last place that I was living in Silicon Valley was an electric dryer. Again, another storytelling. I move into this place, getting water heaters or water filtration systems and other things put into my place. The one person who was doing that also does other stuff, and he saw solar panels and up on top of my house, and so he started to go about like, it's a waste, you never own it, blah blah blah. He starts to talk about some other things. I was just like, okay, so what do you think about a tankless water heater here? He's like, it's a waste. This thing, has so much water in it. Whenever you need it hot, it's hot. Whenever, it's not too hot, you just let it run for a little bit. He started to tell me all of these things. A white gentleman, no disrespect calling out anybody based off ethnicity, but just, again, telling and sharing the story from a lived experience. His reality check was not that I was just a homeowner, right? Like, his reality check was that I was not knowledgeable of any of this stuff. I have 2 engineering degrees from Northwestern. He didn't know that. I don't need to talk about it. Don't need to brag about it. But in that flip of juice and having the power, I sat there and took in this as an opportunity for community engagement, right? A story that I can take back, right? And I saw someone really going and speaking down on everything that you all are here for and you all are doing. And they're the ones that are supposed to be helping me get my place. Can't find it. That's a similar story in so many of our neighborhoods, especially those that are just Black and brown. But as we flip this story about what we're doing here in Silicon Valley, I was able to find partners like Sean Armstrong and Redwood Energy. And so what we are now embarking on is a trek of a 10-year electrification engine here in Silicon Valley and beyond. And that electrification engine really is about talking about an ecosystem that supports both a safety net pillar as well as a workforce development pillar. Again, getting people in the job, that's kind of cool. I have a daughter now, 18 months old. Shout out to Zip. Daddy, you ever see this? This is recorded. I love you, right? But I'm doing this stuff for my daughter, as well. When we start to talk about safety net as well as workforce development, my biggest job is not having my daughter on any pole. And there's a lot of jobs that we start to put people into this pipeline that really start to feel like some type of initiation or some type of process to something else that we might not even get to. I was in Google development, understood how many lives are lost in construction, right? So I'm really talking about these things from a lived experience. And so I'm not just focused on someone getting a certain type of job. I'm focused on someone getting a family sustaining job, because if they take those types of chances, at least their family should be taken care of. So as we started to build out this plug, right, this electrification ecosystem, we really started to think through all of the various barriers of entry for us. And one of the biggest things that, we came to realize is that our youth can start to be in this ecosystem earlier and earlier. And so as we think about ecosystem development, thinking about our youth, as well as thinking about our adult education, recidivism, reentry, any of these populations, there's always a place here. And so because of the National Science Foundation, we're now moving towards a 10-year, $160 million electrification engine that's going to pull all of these partners across the Bay Area that are already doing some amazing things. But more importantly, we're going about this with the JEDI lens: justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. So when we talk about workforce development, we talk about the education and training. You're seeing some of the partners on the screen right now. That will evolve because we'll take 2 years to plan out what this 10-year ecosystem actually looks like. And our ecosystem, especially with Lighthouse, needs to be a beacon for everyone. Does not need to just serve California, does not need to just serve Silicon Valley. It needs to go beyond. So we needed to start to really be intentional, right? Various levels and players, so that when we think about education and training, we're not just putting people into a job or pipeline goes to PG&E, Con Edison, any type of Edison or that. We also need to think about innovation and entrepreneurship. We need to think about the Sean Armstrongs and many of you that are doing this work and not being paid, especially when you're doing equitable work. You're talking about affordable housing, you're capped, right? You can't spend as much. You can't even charge as much, right? But again, it's not just that. The JEDI safety net has to have something that propels one forward, not just catches them, right? So really our net is about being able to think through all of the issues: community education and engagement. What are the terms, right? I'm working on something. Sean threw in AMP diet, through Stanford University professors through a loop. What's AMP diet? Luckily, I'm an engineer. Luckily, he has a video, and I'm in my mind, it was like, okay, I think it probably is this. Was able to find it. But that lets me know that there's different translations that are needed across the board. And we're not even just talking about language. We talked about capacity building, funding and resources, all of these things. We don't want you to take 3 months to get a certification or training and you're not being paid. We're going to make sure you get paid for that training period and get placed into a job that allows you access and opportunities to other places, but also a safety net that also shows other certifications that you just might be a credit or two away from, right? Working with Stanford to ensure that social capital is also a part of our story, right? So if there's a person that cannot finish, but they've started, why are we going to put them through a whole new process or a whole new 2-year, 4-year process? Stanford, see what they did, give them those credits, allow them that access there, which means they never lost that money, never lost that time. They might have just had a hiccup. So again, it's a propel rather than just catching someone. Last two slides, I promise, because I definitely wanted to leave some information, and I'm probably speaking a mile a minute. The new. For us in our Jedi approach, sometimes you have to be very, very intentional and call it like it is, black and brown. And in our ecosystem development, we're intentional on employing and including Black-owned HVAC folks, companies, right? So if we want to think about instructors who are helping instruct folks in youth in the Bay Area, we're going to connect to Atlanta. Right? We have a partnership now that's being developed with UNCF and Atlanta University, the HBCUs there, Georgia Tech, to have an electrification exchange. We're doing some great things here. They have a lot of knowledge over where you all are. You all have a lot more knowledge than us. Silicon Valley is just popping up over the last 15 years. Let's be real. They're going through puberty, just got out of it, maybe, right? So a lot of lessons that can be learned, especially around inclusivity or the Jedi mindset. And so we are very intentional, even bringing ours to Central Valley, California, right? Where we'll look with Latino owned HVAC folks and everyone around the electrification ecosystem. So we're really going to be intentional around there, not just taking talent, but also returning or providing access to what we have here to various places across the country. But we'll have a 10-year, opportunity to do this. I'm sure I'll be reaching out to many of you because, again, as I think about how we advance, we also have something called a Jedi Council. So I bring out the big one for this. But with the Jedi Council, paid opportunities for your services, right? For the work that you've already done to inform us. No free labor around here. My parents, everybody, Jesse, they built me to take over the house, not a field. So we had that same mentality when we think about our Jedi stuff. We're this that you see on there, another reference from Juice, the movie, is what we also want to see on our streets. Those folks are happy right there. Don't care what it might look like or sound like. Let's change that story. Let's change that narrative. And on that level, it's all about family sustainability and economic freedom. So this is Q in that movie called Juice. My name is Q. Please call me Q because people misspell my name. It's an E in there instead of an I, but this is a sign off. That right there, Black Boy Joy. Let's see joy in our faces, especially as we get older. Let's not just lose that joy when we're kids, right? Let's continue to move this forward. This is freedom. This is happiness. This is why I'm here to continue to tell you all a story and bring more funders, bring more opportunities directly to you. So thank you all for the time. If there's any questions, I'm here for it.
Woo! Q. Keep your lightsaber up there. I mean, you are.
I appreciate it.
Fantastic. So you did it, right? You put in the submittal yesterday?
Yeah, well, today. Yeah. Today we put it in. So that got in there. 15 pages in the project description, thanks to you, and many more documents. But yes, we got it in today, beat the deadline. And also, thanks for allowing me to follow up a little bit. Governor's Office of California is also supporting us. We also got two major funders in Silicon Valley to fund this initiative and the planning around it too. So we don't need just the government or just the NSF money to move this forward. We're also, my job again, doing a little bit of the Pied Piper or Robin Hood, call it what you want, but being around those that have in Silicon Valley and making sure philanthropy is true philanthropy and not just corporate marketing.
It's incredible. So you're saying the program has begun. Like you have funding from the governor's office and two Silicon Valley folks and the NSF, and they've given you some really strong support saying like, we like what you're doing, please submit. Like you have a good feeling on that too.
Yeah, we have a great feeling. So beyond good, we have a great feeling. And when it's in writing, something I can take to the bank.
Whew. Okay, so I want to give other people voices here too. So Javier Montalvo says, electrify, exclamation mark, plug one on stakes is high.
Ooh, I appreciate you, Javier. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can you explain what that means for those of us who don't understand?
Oh, sorry. So he's talking about, well, Stakes is High is an album of De La Soul. De La Soul, hugely impactful hip hop group, really about community and all of that stuff. So he's shouting out these songs and as well as plug one of the artists in the album.
Nice, excellent. Let's see here. And Marnise Jackson wanted to tell you that she loved it. Just so you know.
Thank you.
And Junior,
Tazo.
it was outstanding, Q.
All right.
So could you speak a little bit more about your relationship with the United Negro College Fund? And because that is pretty exciting that you're expanding this opportunity outside of Silicon Valley and making that partnership. Could you talk a little bit about your history there and how that happened?
Yeah, so way back when, well, right now, if you go on UNCF, you'll see that they have something called the Empower Me Tour, college tour across various campuses. We initially started with Hillhopper. I created that. So almost 20 years, it feels like now. UNCF used to be my client, President Lomax. We did a whole bunch of stuff together, really in growing their base and growing their funding and setting up strategic programs that would bring more access and opportunities to HBCUs. So my relationships goes, 20 years back. Fast forward, the vice president, the associate vice president there now is also someone, when I was doing pharmaceutical marketing, her and I were partners in that work. And so she's actually leading that. But I think the biggest thing is that what we're doing is intentionally creating an electrification pipeline from those HBCUs, really targeting ATL, Atlanta. But again, it's a pilot. So the goal is to go, beyond it. And we have three universities that they've targeted, but more importantly, UNCF's STEM initiative is partnering with this. So the goal is to grow it even beyond just thinking electrification, but really thinking about across other, places and resources that can be brought. Georgia Tech already has a 10-year initiative that they started back in 2020 called Electrify Georgia Tech. And that's, it actually is perfect timing for us because, they're a few years into this where they're doing electrification across their campus. So not just cars and those things, but also landscaping equipment, everything. And so we're going to partner with them and also with Stanford to bring some of that working, understanding, and knowledge here, work with folks like yourself on building curriculum that's also really authentic to those communities. So you don't get any better than, going right directly to the source, and UNCF is definitely one of those sources.
I just got to pause for a second. I could try to pay attention. I'm sure there's other people who are doing better work, but what Georgia Tech is doing there, I don't know of anything like that cool in California, going after the landscaping equipment. And I mean, that's really remarkable.
Yeah. They are our leaders. As an engineer, I almost went to Georgia Tech as an engineering student. So I was proud to see them continuing to do a lot of work there around equity. But that program, that Electrified GT is really impressive. I mean, you can find them. I think it's Electrified GT on Instagram if you want to just check out what they've been doing.
Nice. Okay, that's awesome. And I'm curious, can you speak a little bit more about the relationships that you see? Can you give a story of how would someone get recruited into this program, and where would they come out? Just give an example story of someone in, and then where does it end for them?
Yeah, an example story, the kid that's playing with Legos, I want to grab him. I want to grab a child, who is noticed by a teacher or even, family members, notice their inquisitiveness, all that stuff that we see. We have building a program, putting them into a K-5 program that starts to build out those skills that's paid for. Also supplemental education, things around it. But really, I'm thinking of that child being identified early on some skills. Maybe they're ADHD, not paying attention, but they're doing something constructive. Finding that child, pulling them into this program, that program being attached to apprenticeships and internships with various folks in this ecosystem that we're trying to develop. We spot them, we mentor them, we take them through in a funded capacity. We see them through this, they become the people that are making the next pump of sorts, to serve their community. And that is happening in their own ecosystem of that community. A new business is spurred from there, new opportunities are spurred from there. And when I say opportunities, I'm not saying just that electrification. We know that in anything that we do in this, especially in America and capitalism, there's other businesses that happen from that. So if we start to get more solar panels on roofs, there are going to be people that need to get up on that roof to protect you from all the pigeons that are now going to build a house underneath those, right? That's an ecosystem, but that starts to bring more into a community as well, which Lance was talking about as well. So when we start to think about placemaking, development, housing, all of that, that ecosystem, that child can graduate into creating his own new ecosystem for some of our most diverse population and left behind populations in the US, but beyond.
And can I ask, you used to work for Google as your last employer.
Yep.
You had $15 billion worth of development, and you were in charge of community engagement.
Correct.
I'm curious,
Development engagement. Yep.
you know, your program is around home electrification, but it sounds like what do you see Google's relationship with this home electrification program?
So when we talk about pipeline development, right, in the ecosystem, so Google, yeah, I was on that project in Mountain View. You just completed, you know, this carbon zero, this whole, and all of the stuff that, you know, I was a part of. That was my team. We were all on there, but it was my job to figure out the ecology and environmental folks, right, and bring them into the loop of what they wanted to see while this stuff is being developed. So with Google, knowing that we have a pipeline going at least until 2040 of these types of jobs, construction, building, electrification. So not just housing, although Google has 20,000 housing units just in one of their city developments being developed. So there's all of these pieces. That's a pipeline. I was also in there working on the workforce development plan for that too, thinking 10 years out. We were able to start there and say the person born today has an opportunity to have a job here in 20 years, right? In any of this, whether it's inside Google or it's working on one of the developments, working in housing. And so we have a partnership, and we're continuing to develop our partnership across this. So I created something called a Jedi Partnership Breakfast. And so we've been bringing those employers and foundations and philanthropists to the bases that we have career technical education training, right? So places where the youth are going into high school building tiny homes. We're bringing Google. Google is now going to be funding that program, which then creates a pipeline into those jobs. So our ecosystem has a pipeline for the home residential for sure, but our ecosystem is also thinking through all of the electrification jobs that are happening, not just home and building residential, right? We're thinking about what cities are doing for their infrastructure. And we want to make sure that there's opportunities for those folks here, right, who have been left out to actually be first in line for that, or at least have a fair start and not a false start.
Yeah, you're amazing.
Appreciate you. You're amazing. No, that's all of you. You all are doing it. I get to talk about it. You all are doing it. I'm just lucky to be an engineer in Oakland.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.